Radiant and Resilient is about mindset and faith to break paradigms and overcome challenges in our life. Because when the mind, body, and spirit are aligned, we literally radiate from the inside out. I'm Kay Vasquez. Let's dive in. During pregnancy, I prayed to God to have a supernatural birth and to use this birth as a testament to His glory and power. To give you a little background, the reason why I prayed this prayer was because I wanted to have a natural, unmedicated birth at home. There's been several women who have just been such an inspiration in my life who have had their own home births. And because they inspired and encouraged me, I wanted to experience the same. I mean, after all, God created women to not only create and carry a life, but also to birth life, right? And I really truly believe that the reason why a lot of women have trouble giving birth is just because of the fear that's been instilled in them for a very long time. I mean, if you think about it, when Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, as a consequence, God made childbirth painful. But what we don't realize is that it doesn't have to be that way, not anymore. And so one of the women that inspired me to have a natural birth at home, she actually read a book called Supernatural Birth by Jackie Mize. And I will put a link in the show notes so you can look into it as well. But when reading this book, it just reminded me of all the scriptures speaking about women giving birth to children, especially those that are having trouble with a miscarriage and unable to get pregnant, but also once we are pregnant, having a supernatural birth. And it can be pain-free. One of the perspectives I got from the book was that when Jesus came to pay for all our sins, He redeemed us. He redeemed us from everything, including experiencing a painful childbirth. So I wanted to have a natural birth at home, and I wanted to experience birth the way that God created us to give birth. We also didn't know the gender of our baby. So for 41 weeks and a day, we didn't know the gender of our little one until the day that I gave birth. Because for me, I felt that finding out at birth was going to just be so much more incredible to experience this journey of becoming pregnant and not knowing what I was going to have, and then going through a supernatural labor and delivery to give birth to a boy or girl. The beauty of seeing the baby that God chose for us. During the entire pregnancy, as I prayed to God for a supernatural birth, I also envisioned the type of birth that I wanted. And of course, like most women, want a fast, like 3-4 hour labor max, quick, effortless, painless, right? Well, even though I envisioned the type of birth that I wanted, I also wanted it during the day. I wanted it to rain, and after the rain, see a rainbow. I had it all envisioned. I had it all planned out how I wanted it to go. However, I've learned that in life, we can want a specific outcome. We can want things to go a certain way, but it doesn't always go the way we want, especially with childbirth. And I've heard so many women share their stories of how the birth didn't go how they wanted it, but it ended up being so much better. It ended up being exactly what was supposed to happen. I definitely didn't get the birth that I envisioned. There was no rainbows and it wasn't during the day, but it was exactly the supernatural birth I asked for. And so on a Sunday night, when my husband was at work, was when I started early labor. I had gone to bed a couple hours later, ended up waking up because the contractions, or what I like to refer to as surges, were starting to become a little bit more regular, but were still irregular and a little bit more intense. The reason why I refer to them as surges is because words are powerful. There's a negative connotation associated with contractions, and it's usually rooted with fear. So I use the term surges because as the uterus contracts, it's literally a surge of energy. It's a muscle that's contracting and can be intense, but it doesn't have to be painful. And that's what I learned from the book, is that the contractions, also known as surges, don't have to be painful. Yes, they're going to be intense. Yes, you're still going to feel it, but it doesn't have to be painful. And so at the beginning, it was very, very mild. I had very mild surges. I could feel the muscles tightening and relaxing, and it was still regular, but it was definitely way more frequent than the Braxton Hicks contractions that I was having, which I didn't feel at all for the couple weeks leading up to this day. And so what was interesting is that the cold temperature in our room made the surges a little bit more intense. So I couldn't sleep that night. I texted my husband, letting him know. He ended up coming home. We also texted a friend of ours who also came over to provide additional emotional, physical support. I texted my midwife in the morning, who said, stop counting the contractions and just to go about the day and let her know when they were becoming even more regular. So we went about the day. I don't even remember what we did, but it wasn't until Monday evening when we went to bed. Again, I couldn't sleep because the cold room in our air was causing the surges to be really, really intense, and I was so uncomfortable. A couple hours later, because I couldn't get to sleep and I felt like it was starting to become more regular, I woke my husband up. I said, I think we're having a baby tonight. We ended up texting my midwife, who ended up coming over around midnight. So this is Monday night going into Tuesday morning. So while we were waiting for the midwife to come, my friend and husband started to inflate the tub, filled the tub with water, and I got into the tub and I started active labor pretty much in the tub. But once my midwife came over, it was a few hours later, she decided to check the position of the baby. And she noticed that the baby wasn't descending past my pubic bone, even though I was having regular surges. She also did a cervical exam, and I was pretty much fully dilated at this point. Like, everything was progressing, but the baby was not descending past my pubic bone. So early Tuesday morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, she had me go through a round of different exercises from what's called spinning babies to help move the baby into position, to help the baby descend into the birth canal. I had to wait till a surge came on to do each exercise, and I had to do at least 10 reps of each exercise. And let me tell you, it was intense. It was definitely very challenging because at this point, I hadn't slept for 2 nights, and I also had not been eating as well, except for whatever I had on Monday. So having to put my body through exercises with each surge was definitely challenging, but I got through each exercise. And after we finished the last one, she rechecked the position and the baby had moved. I was so hopeful because at this point, even though I was in active labor, the baby wasn't in the right position. My water hadn't broken. So I was hopeful that these exercises were going to move things along. Well, that wasn't the case. Once the sun rose up, she realized things were still not progressing. I was still laboring, but water still had not broken. So she rechecked the baby's position, and she noticed that the baby had moved back into the previous position. And I was a little disheartened at this point because I was really starting to get physically exhausted, but also mentally and emotionally. A lot of thoughts, a lot of fears were starting to pop up. And so she had me get into the pool. I got into the pool to move around, but of course had to stop with each surge while my husband was putting counter pressure on my back. After being in the pool for a bit, I finally got out of the pool. But again, the baby was still not moving back into position. It wasn't until about early afternoon my midwife called the founder of the Spinning Babies. She told her, okay, we've gone through the exercises. This is what's happening. Water hasn't broken. Baby's not in position. What should we do? So it was interesting to hear the conversation because the founder thought that maybe it could be a lumbar issue, which I do have scoliosis. However, intuitively, I didn't feel like that was the issue. I didn't feel like the scoliosis was keeping the baby from moving down. But one thing she said was that it could be spiritual. At the time, I didn't make the connection, but reflecting back on the birth, it makes complete sense because I asked God for a supernatural birth. She also recommended I get a massage just to release any tension in the fascia, the muscles, I could also be keeping her from moving down. So my midwife ended up contacting another midwife that was working along with her to come and do a massage. While we were waiting for her to come, she also had me go back through the exercises again one more time. But at this point, my energy was getting more and more depleted. I was really feeling just exhausted. My legs were getting weak and shaky, and to stand up took so much energy. And not only that, to do each exercise through each surge required so much energy. When she suggested I do another round of the exercise, I was thinking, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I have enough energy to do it again, because the first round was a lot. It was a lot, and it was intense. But I was determined. I was determined to keep going. And so I started another round of the exercises. It was a lot slower the second time around, but halfway through, the midwife finally showed up. Once she started giving me a massage, again, at this point, the water had not broken. So my midwives suggested that they could break the water for me because I was just not only physically, but mentally exhausted. I actually seriously was contemplating, even though intuitively, deep down inside, I didn't want it. I wanted my body to do it for me. I'm so grateful for my husband because he stepped in and he said, no, you're not breaking her water. We're going to let her body do it for her. Having someone to advocate for you during childbirth is so, so important. And not only that, when we found out that the baby had moved back into its previous position and was not moving down, he sent out messages to family and friends to start praying. So we had people praying for us. My husband's advocating for me just to keep going. And one of the great things about my midwife was that she honored our requests. She also saw that I was getting exhausted and allowed me periods of rest. After the massage, I finally went to the toilet, which is known as the dilation station. After having several intense surges, there was one really intense one where my husband was putting counter pressure on my back when finally we heard a pop. The water had finally broken. I was so exhausted at this point, but also hopeful because I was like, the water is finally broken. But mind you, this is late Tuesday afternoon, and I still didn't know how much longer I was going to keep going, how much longer I was going to be in active labor, because I knew I still had the transition and the ring of fire to come before delivering our baby. Once the water had broken, I was laboring in and out of the tub. We were doing different positions to speed things along because there were moments when I was in the tub, the contractions would slow down, and midwife would give me homeopathic herbs. She'd also put clary sage into her essential oil diffuser, and as soon as it hit my nose, the surges would ramp back up again. It was the wildest thing, but that's just the power of plants. Plants are medicine. So why use synthetic medications when we have plants that are available, that are natural, that can do a lot of the similar things and help facilitate the childbirthing process, right? Especially if you're low risk. So I was very appreciative she had these herbs just to provide additional support, especially when I was getting a little bit tired and the surges were slowing down. It would help to speed things up a little bit, but it wasn't overbearing. It wasn't overpowering because they're more natural. While I was in the tub, I finally hit the transition. I was starting to feel nauseous because at this point I hadn't eaten anything since Monday, and we're now going into late Tuesday evening, and I was starting to feel nauseous, but I didn't want to vomit. I was resisting vomiting, but with every change in position, I would get nauseous until I finally just surrendered and allowed the vomit to come. It was the wildest thing. I never thought I would actually be vomiting during labor, but it happened. Finally, after some time in the tub, my midwife was able to feel the baby's head coming down the canal. She's like, okay, we need to get you out of the tub. We need to get you into a different position. And so let's go to the bedroom. So we made our way to the bedroom. While I was on the bed, she had me bearing down while I was holding onto my legs. And with each surge, they could finally see the head starting to emerge. At this point, the surges were at their peak. They were the most intense that I felt. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I can keep going. Like, I don't know if I have the energy. We're so close, but I'm so exhausted, mentally, emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted. It was taking so much energy, what energy I had left, to push with each surge. But I remember just keep pushing, because at one point while I was back in the tub, I remember thinking, slow and steady, slow and steady. I wasn't meant to rush this birth. I wasn't meant to force this birth. In fact, that's everything in life. My mantra has always been slow and steady. And not only that, I also was praying to God for the strength to just keep going, to keep pushing through each stage, keep going through active labor into transition, to keep going through transition and to finally birth our baby. And so when I was on the bed, all I could focus on was just each breath and using what energy I had left to push. At one point, my midwife had me reach down and touch the head, which was finally emerging. And I'm so grateful she did, because as I touched our baby's head, that gave me what little energy and strength I had left to just keep going, gave me the encouragement that I was almost there. I had a couple more intense, really intense surges, experienced that burning from the ring of fire when I knew that she was crowning. And it was so intense. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can keep doing this, but I knew I had to keep going. So I kept pushing and just focusing on each breath. The baby's head finally emerged. And then with one really intense surge, I pushed again and the rest of the body came out. So remember, we didn't know the gender. And once the baby came out, it took some time to get the baby to take the first breath. Once the baby was finally on my chest, I was like, oh yeah, what is the gender? I was so tired, so exhausted. I almost forgot to check the gender, but I finally looked down. Initially, I saw the umbilical cord, so I thought it was a boy. But then I realized it was the umbilical cord and I moved it out of the way. I was looking down at our baby girl. Not only that, a month before our baby was born, I had a dream that I gave birth to a girl with dark hair. And laying on my chest was a baby girl with dark hair. I gave birth to our baby girl on Wednesday morning at 2 a.m. And that was after 29 hours of active labor, not including the early labor. This is the time when we contacted our midwife on Monday evening until Wednesday morning, 29 hours. It's so wild to think back. Everyone was praying. Everyone couldn't believe how long I was going. And I remember at one point I even told my midwife, I don't know how women can go this long, especially if they didn't prepare their bodies physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I'm so grateful that I prepared my body physically, mentally, emotionally by nourishing my body with the right foods, optimizing nutrients, exercising, getting good quality sleep, reducing stress, working on my mindset. Because birth is not just a physical process. It's a mental, it's emotional, it's a spiritual process. It's a transformative process that we go through. I truly believe if women aren't ready, it's so easy to get caught up in the fear, because yes, I had lots of thoughts that would pop in that were rooted in fear, thoughts of giving up, thoughts of going to the hospital and just going the easy route, getting the medications. But we build that mental resilience when we can just surrender those thoughts and pray to God, ask Him for the strength to keep going, because that's what I did. In those moments when we go through trials and challenges where it's so uncomfortable, we don't know if we can keep going. We don't know if we have the energy, the strength to keep going. That's when we double down in prayer. That's when we fully rely on God's strength and power to get us through. So I share this story because I got the supernatural birth I asked for. And supernatural doesn't mean that it's going to be easy and quick and effortless. No, it's actually the opposite. Supernatural means we're going to go through a challenge. We're going to go through trials. It's up to us to fully surrender in those moments and seek God to give us the strength, to give us the power, to give us the wisdom, whatever it is that we need in those moments to keep going, to help us get through that challenge. That's supernatural. And like I said, looking back, and the founder spinning babies said it could be spiritual, it definitely was spiritual. After so many hours being fully dilated, regular contractions, no one could figure out or explain why she wasn't moving down. Well, that's because there were supernatural things happening that we probably don't understand, that we don't realize. And it was an opportunity for us to fully surrender, fully rely on God to step in and let Him do what no one else could do. That's supernatural. So I share my story again as a testament to God's strength and power, but also to encourage so many women who are thinking about having a home birth. Now, I definitely recommend working with not only an OBGYN, but also a midwife, assessing your risk to see if this is possible to do at home. Most of the time it is, especially if you're low risk, but also read the book Supernatural Birth. Fill your mind, fill your heart with God's word. Pray to God, seek Him, and surround yourself with people who are there to support you, who will also pray for you during this experience. And if you're listening and you're not pregnant, you're not looking to have a supernatural birth, you can also take away something from my story as well. Things can happen in your life in a supernatural way, especially when you go through trials and challenges. The supernatural experience doesn't apply just to the birth of our daughter, but I've had so many other moments in my life, with my marriage, with the business as a functional medicine practitioner, different things in my personal life that have happened in a supernatural way because I surrendered control. I sought God for His strength, for His wisdom, for His peace in those moments. And He's always showed up in supernatural ways. So it doesn't matter where you're at in your journey. I hope my story just really inspires and encourages you to experience God in a supernatural way. And it starts with surrendering. If you haven't yet, I highly encourage you go back and listen to the episode on steps to surrendering effortlessly, but also my episode on prayer, because prayer is such a powerful tool. It definitely helped us get through this supernatural birth. And I do believe that whatever you're experiencing in this life on your journey, prayer can be a powerful tool for you as well. If my story resonates with you, you took something away from my story, it inspired you or encouraged you in any way, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me on Instagram at the Kate Vasquez. And in the meantime, keep tuning in, listening, because I have more insights, more things to share, especially now that I have delivered our baby girl. There's so many things that I've learned postpartum that I can't wait to share with you, as well as more client stories as I continue to work with clients and just sharing the amazing breakthroughs they have with their health. And eventually, I'm going to be bringing back more incredible people to interview as we continue to dive deeper into their lives as they share their insights and wisdom. So there's still so much more to come on this journey, becoming radiant and resilient.